In a recent video, I talked about how to choose the right font for every design project. I went into detail on all the different types of fonts, variations within each category, and the feelings that they evoke based on their history and context. Today, as sort of a part 2 to that video, I want to show you my 20 absolute favorite fonts just to give you some inspiration. I absolutely love finding new fonts, and so I love videos like this, and I really hope you enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with two serif fonts that are a little bit different from your average serif. So these are called wedge serifs. Arpana, the first one, has small, really subtle wedge serifs, where Zangezi has really obvious, sharp wedge serifs. And so it makes it a really, really interesting font. The proportions are really uneven, as you can see, which gives it even more character. Next, let's talk about two script fonts. I don't often go for scripts, but these two are really, really nice. So the first one is Palm Canyon Drive, and it is 40s and 50s inspired, very vintage, inspired by Southern California. And it's got a really low X height, which makes it really kind of dramatic and theatrical. Next is Beverly Drive, which is really interesting because it's left leaning instead of right leaning like normal script fonts are. It's also got a low X height, which makes it super dramatic, and it's just very retro feeling. Next, let's talk about three serif fonts that are really different from each other. So the first is Taco. It's got these really chunky serifs, and it's super high contrast. I absolutely love this font, and it's cool because it looks really different and thin as opposed to heavy, and there are tons and tons of weights in between. So love that one. Next is Archer with these geometric slab serifs. And this is really kind of nice and delicate when you pick a light font, but a lot more substantial at a heavier weight. So again, really a lot of variation there. And last is Playfair Display. So I honestly really like using the italics version of this. I think it's really beautiful. It's really delicate and high contrast. And yeah, when it comes to serif fonts, often if I'm just looking for a traditional serif font, I'll go for Playfair Display. Next is Varela Round, and I feel like I needed to throw a rounded cornered typeface in here because sometimes it really comes in handy. I don't reach for it often, but when I need something rounded, usually I'll go for this one. Next, let's look at two condensed fonts that are my go-to when I need something really tall. So the first is Acumen Pro, and like I said, when I need something more condensed, I'll opt for the condensed version. Acumen is an awesome font because it just has so many variations. And the other condensed font I really like is this alternative Gothic sans serif, Oswald. It is a super nice one. It's a little bit more squared, which sometimes comes in handy, and that's another great one. Next, let's talk about the 6 sans serif fonts that are my absolute go-tos for things like body copy or just something really simple. We have Sweet Sans Pro, which is one of my favorites these days. Circular Standard, which is just a little bit more circular. Sophia Pro, also really circular, but just a little bit of a different feel. We have Work Sans, Roboto, which is just a little bit more narrow, and Montserrat. Since these are all sans serif fonts with very low contrast and very high X height, they all feel really stable and grounding, easy to read, and they all feel really similar to each other, but there are just slight variations to where I like to have all of these in my tool belt, and I'll reach for them, try them out, and see which one fits best for my project. And these last 4 are also sans serif fonts, but they've got a bit more character to them. We have Covic Sans, which is characterized as neo-grotesque. Grotesque really just means sans serif, but some of the earliest sans serif fonts, usually with more character. And when we say neo-grotesque, that means that it's a little bit more geometric. Next, we have Wolf, and Wolf has Wolf Sans and Wolf Mono, and I really like both of these, even though they're pretty different. So there's a lot of variations here. There's a sans mono, there's have it in Roman and italic, and they're all really, really interesting fonts. Next, we have Obviously, which is really similar to Volf, but I think it is just even a little bit more low contrast. It's very uniform and homogeneous. And lastly, we have Termina, and this is one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos. It's really wide or extended. It has a high X height, really low contrast, making it really easy to read and really grounding and gets your attention. So that's definitely one of my favorites. And those are my 20 favorite fonts at the moment. I have a blog post linked down below that will link out to each one wherever you can download or purchase it. Some of them do cost money, and I personally really like to support independent typographers, and so I have no problem spending money on fonts that I'm going to continue to use. So if that's something you're able to do, I highly recommend doing it and not just always opting for the free fonts. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and check out the corresponding video if you want to learn more about typography and how to choose the best fonts for each individual project. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!